Hey everyone, good morning everyone. My name is Johannes Damadat Patlak and I'm going to do a small introduction before we start with it. Of Welcome to this first Caribbean hangout that we organize as Climate Tracker, and this is in partnership with the Cropper Foundation. And yeah, I'm back. Thank you. So it has been a process of 2 months of training um, of fellows in the Citizen Climate Journalism Fellowship program that we have. And these were fellows from Guyana, Suriname, and TNT, Trinidad and Tobago, that have published their story. So I think that you guys have read their stories on our website. So I'm going to give Dizan Billy, she is the Caribbean Regional Director of Climate Tracker, the floor now. So she's going to address you something, say some words about what we do in the region. Dizan?
Okay, thank you so much, Johannes. So, welcome everyone to this session again, where we're just going to go a little bit deeper into the stories that our fellows were able to publish with the support of Climate Tracker over the past 2 months or so. It was about 2 months of training and one-on-one mentoring, and we're really proud of our fellows and what they have been able to produce. All right, so before I go into Climate Tracker and what we do and a little bit more about the fellowship itself, I want to introduce Omar Mohammed from the Cropper Foundation. And the Cropper Foundation was our partner organization for this fellowship, and we were really happy to have them on board and to really kick off this sort of citizen journalism focused initiative in the region. Because, as citizens journalism is very important for this region that is already facing some very dire effects from climate change. So Omar is the Chief Executive Officer at the Cropper Foundation, which is an NGO based in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm going to hand it over to Omar. So he's going to bring some greetings and tell us a little bit more about the organization and the overall project under which this fellowship falls. Omar?
Great, thanks so much, Dizan. Hi, everyone. So, as Dizan said, the Cropper Foundation is an NGO, civil society organization, and we work primarily in Trinidad and Tobago and are slowly extending our work out to the region because we think that we've learned quite a bit over the last 22 years, and we are anxious to use what we've learned and our experiences to help support sustainability across the region. And a part of that is, again, extending this approach of increasing accountability and transparency across issues related to sustainability, climate change, climate justice, and so on. And we've been working towards this for quite some time. But over the last 2 years or so, since 2020, we've been really trying to put a lot of emphasis on this idea of journalism, citizen journalism in particular, through the development of the Caribou Environmental News Network. So www.caribou.org. And what Caribou started out as was a platform to help persons from communities tell stories about environmental justice, especially for communities in Trinidad and Tobago who were living on the front lines of the extractive sector. And from the success of that, over the last year and a half, we got the opportunity to partner with Climate Tracker using a small grant from the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute under their own project amplifying local voices for just and resilient COVID-19 recovery. And with that small grant, we were able to help support a citizen journalism climate fellowship with Climate Tracker that fits really nicely into the existing program of workshops and fellowships around climate justice. And we were able to start off at least I hope this is the first iteration. I hope we have, several others in the coming months and years. And we were able to pull together an amazing team of citizen journalists from Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname. And their stories, of course, are being published on Climate Tracker and will be published on Caribou as well. And what we're really hoping to do through these stories and this new network is really just drive the engagement on Caribou, get more people willing to tell stories. Again, it doesn't matter if you're a, quote unquote professional journalist or formal journalist, but if you have the experience or knowledge or real connections in communities in particular who might not necessarily be able to tell their own stories or get the sort of coverage necessary, that's what Caribou is here to do. So it's been a really great experience, I think, working with Climate Tracker, and I'm pretty sure everyone that they partner with said the same thing. The stories that the fellows have written are, I think, on par with whatever you will read in, international magazines or reporting around climate justice. So I think, it really shows that, this type of coverage can come from, any sort of sector of society once you have the support and the platform to tell those stories. So just want to say thanks again to Dizan, Johannes, the entire Climate Tracker team, of course, the Canary for providing the support through their larger projects. And I think, of course, the new citizen journalists who I think have really kicked off their, it could be a new career, have kicked off their sort of entry into this field with a bang. And I think you all will really get a lot of useful information. You will just have the pleasure of reading really well-crafted stories. And I think the important thing is to realize that there are more people now in your country who you can reach out to help tell these stories. So that's it for me. And I look forward to hearing more from the fellows during the course of this morning.
Thank you so much, Omar, for that little introduction there. And thanks to those who have joined us. I'm looking forward to maybe hearing your questions at the end because we have a nice lineup today of some of our fellows who have published their stories. So right now, I am going to go straight into sharing a little bit more about Climate Tracker. And without any further ado, let me just share my screen to talk a little bit about the program itself, a little bit about what Climate Tracker has done in the region, and a little bit about the program itself. All right, so can someone please confirm that they're seeing my screen?
I'm seeing it.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so I'll introduce myself again. My name is Dizan Billy. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. That is my dog that you're hearing barking in the background. And, the Caribbean team, it's something that is new, recently started for Climate Tracker. But, with the help of the Cropper Foundation and a couple of our other partners, we've been able to really kick off some great programs in 2022. And as Omar would have said, some of these programs that we want to continue into 2023. So who is Climate Tracker? A little bit about us. We were founded in 2015 and we're basically an international nonprofit organization, and we work with young journalists, young aspiring journalists across the Caribbean, Latin American, African, and Asian regions specifically to help them develop their capacity to report on climate change, report on the big climate debates that are happening in their countries and their regions, and also to help them network and connect with people in their region as well as outside of their region. So that's what we focus focus on at Climate Tracker. And how do we do this? We help by providing fellowships. We also conduct media research. So recently in 2022, we did a really big media research program in Latin America, for instance. And we also wrapped up one in Asia where we focused on looking at how media is reporting on plastics in the region. So apart from trainings, we do very specific media research to understand what the biggest challenges are for reporters, for communicators in different themes of climate change and the environment around the world, right? We also fund young journalists to report on these issues, on the world's most pressing issues, and cover the biggest moments. So, for instance, every year we carry a group of journalists to the Conference of Parties that takes place every year through the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. And I'm really glad to say that in 2022, for instance, we had a really nice Caribbean representation from Jamaica and Trinidad, reporting on what was happening in Egypt at COP27. So this is something that we do as well. And we also support global collaborations between young climate journalists and newsrooms and NGOs around the world. Right, so that's just a little bit about Climate Tracker itself. The Caribbean team, as I said, it's a bit nascent. So we are in the process of developing our team right now. Apart from myself, I also work with Johannes from Suriname, who is our Caribbean Program Officer, Hippolito from Belize, and he's one of our journalism mentors. And these, they were very influential and crucial in the citizens journalism program, having worked one-on-one with each of the 10 fellows that we had. So just to meet some of our fellows, and here you'll see some of them. This is in 2022, we worked with close to 60 journalists, young journalists across the region. This is just some of them, and some of the programs that they worked on. All right. So where did we work in 2022? We worked in the Dominican Republic, Guyana, Jamaica, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, Belize, the Bahamas, St. Vincent, the Grenadines, and Puerto Rico. These are some of the Caribbean countries that we were able to touch base with in 2022, and we really hope that that increases in 2023, that we have, we touch more countries in the region that we haven't been able to touch before. Some of the partners that we've worked with, the European Climate Foundation, which was very crucial in our energy transition program in 2022. And as Omar would have mentioned, the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute as well, which has been very crucial for some of the work that we've done, and the Cropper Foundation, which we are so grateful to have worked with in 2022, and very influential and crucial as well is the Open Society Foundations, who we must mention is a big partner of ours as well. So just to go through some of the programs that we started off our Caribbean work with, in 2022, we led an energy transition fellowship where we had 30 journalists, and at the end of they got training, and then at the end we selected 9 of them to get grants to write stories. So they wrote stories about energy transition in Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana. Right now, and then at the end of 2022, we launched our Climate Justice Journalism Fellowship, where we're working over the course of 6 months with 15 journalists from across the region, from Belize straight down to Suriname, and working, publishing stories monthly, as well as they'll be working on collaborative stories at the end as well. So here you see just a snapshot of some of them. So thank you so much to our mentors. And I must mention Paula Diaz as well from Chile, who is working with us to mentor our climate justice fellows. And then specifically narrowing down into our Citizens Climate Journalism Fellowship. And when Omar came to me with this idea, I was very excited about it, because citizens climate journalism and citizens climate reporting is not something that, is not getting enough attention. So to launch this sort of inaugural fellowship for the region was something that we were very much on board with. And we worked alongside 10 journalists from Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago to publish 10 stories. And all stories you can find on our website, climatetracker.org, as well as on caribois.org, which is Cropper Foundation's publishing website, is what I should say. All right, so all stories you can find there. what did they focus on? We in the month that we had to work on specifically on training, we worked on teaching them about climate change in the climate science in the Caribbean context, because as you know, it's, you have to look at it in a different regional context in order to understand how the climate crisis is impacting us in different ways. All right, so we went into that, as well as keys to effective climate journalism. We had a really experienced climate reporter from the Bahamas really dive into this with our fellows. Then we looked at the energy sector specifically in the Caribbean, the past, the present, and where we're going in the future in terms of the energy transition. And we also looked at the social and human elements of the climate crisis and how communities, local communities, can get on board with climate action. So, four very critical areas of training were done with our fellows, and you'll see a little screenshot there as well from one of the sessions. So what I thought I would do next is just to highlight three of the most read. So out of the 10 stories that were published, as I mentioned, Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname, three of the stories that got the most reads across the board. This was our number one, and this one was looking at the big news right now, which is Guyana's signing of the carbon credits deal with the Hess Corporation. So if you don't know anything about it, head over to the website and read this story. It's a very big deal right now, and it's going to lead Guyana's low carbon, what they're calling the low carbon development strategy. All right, it's big news. You need to check it out. The second most read story that we had was by Priscilla in Suriname, and it looked at how Suriname's fisheries are being impacted by climate change. All right, now we know that the fisheries industry is something that's very important for the Caribbean, so very critical to understand what the challenges are and therefore how we're gonna, rise above those challenges. And the third most read story was by Monica, right, from Guyana, and she looked at how farmers in Guyana, how they're being impacted by climate change, right, and how it's impacting their bottom line and their livelihoods, right. So, and as we know, a lot of countries, in Trinidad and Tobago as an example, our food import bills are high, right? So this is something that's very important to understand from the ground level in order to kind of direct and inform policies around development of agricultural sector in relation to climate impacts that are already happening in the Caribbean. So here's another shot of our fellows, and that's it. Just to share a little bit about the fellowship itself, about our fellows, their stories. It was a very, very enlightening experience working with all of our fellows. So right now, I'm going to go straight over to introduce some of our fellows. We have 6 of them on board to share a little bit about themselves, a little bit about their experience with the fellowship, and then share their story and why citizens climate journalism is important for their country and for the Caribbean region on a whole. So first off, I have we're going to hear from Christian Zakur. And Christian is an environmental advocate, a project officer, and tree planting ambassador for the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. She's also a member of the United Nations Environment Program Major Group of Children and Youth and the Sustainable Ocean Alliance as well. Christian comes with a wealth of background and knowledge in the environmental field, so I'm very excited to share the stage with Christian. Christian, over to you.
Thank you, Dizan. In a few months, I will also be the proud holder of a certificate in journalism from one of our local colleges. So, yeah, for continuing education. So this is the second fellowship that I've taken with hold on. I think my headphones just disconnected themselves. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah.
This is weird. So I did the energy fellowship, the regional energy fellowship when it first came out, and that was my segue into climate tracker because I didn't really consider myself a journalist before that. And then I've done a lot of advocacy in climate justice, so applying for the citizen journalism fellowship was just a natural progression. And the design, I really hope you'll run that program again. I think more people need to take part in it. But it was empowering to be able to write a story on something that I've done a lot of work for and to be able to report on it with my own unique skills. And the process of doing it was that I approached a local advocate. His name is Gary Aberwood. He's a very controversial figure, so I was taking his comments with a grain of salt. But I was writing down the transcript from his messages because I asked him to send me voice notes, and it was much easier that way. And something he said stood out to me because originally I was just going to write about fossil fuels because I don't really approve of fossil fuels, but they're a necessity. And he said something very specific. I'm going to pull up my article now and quote him. He said, "It's not an option to phase out fossil fuels. We're a third world country that has mismanaged its wealth, and we have a critically dangerous imbalance of trade. We're suffering from potential devaluation. There's poverty, there's malnutrition. It's not an option." And when I was reading the transcript, that just stood out to me. And it made me realize that as much as we can complain about fossil fuels on the global stage and try to phase it out and do another 27 crops to try and phase it out, on the ground in Trinidad, we still depend on it. And that dependence has defined our entire history of development. And it's a topic I'd love to revisit again because of new developments with this dragon field in Venezuela, because it looks like we're going to continue having dependence on fossil fuels. And again, my thanks to Climate Tracker and to my mentor, Hippolito, for helping me. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Christiane. And, I know that that topic that Christiane covered in terms of, the energy transition, it's a very nuanced topic for a country like Trinidad that has been for years, for as long as we know ourselves, dependent on the energy, on oil and gas. So that story, Christiane, thank you for approaching it in the way that you did. And now I'm going to go over to Rubia. So Rubia Bergut, and I hope that I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. I just hope so. Please correct me. But Rubia is an environmentalist with about 18 years of experience in journalism, in and youth work. In her day-to-day work, she is active as a communications officer, a skill that she brings to her work as a volunteer as well. And what she's very passionate about is working with young people and contributing to environmental awareness is something that she's very passionate about. So, Rubia, tell us about your experience with the fellowship, what inspired you to apply, and the story that you wrote. What was that experience like for you?
Hi everyone, my name is Rubia Berhout, we would say in Suriname, but I think wherever you are in the Caribbean, the pronunciation is different. I also participated in the Climate Citizens Journalism Program. And what inspired me was the fact that it was an option for citizens to just get a chance to write about something that they're passionate about or to do research about something that they're interested in. So that was the first thing that got me into the program. I've been active as an environmental activist for over 10 years, I think. And at some point, I noticed during the program that at some point you get kind of caught up in the technical stuff and the day-to-day stuff that you do as an environmentalist. And you're not as sharp anymore to talk about what's really the thing that drives you, which is taking care of the environment and contributing. The speaker before me talked about how fossil fuels are something that we still use. While I was talking, my story was about e-waste and NGOs raising awareness about e-waste. One thing that they mentioned is also we're going towards energy transition and we're going towards greener and cleaner energy. But in my country, one thing that we're not thinking about is if the greener and cleaner energy comes, it's going to come with batteries. It's going to come with products that have to store that energy. How are we going to make sure that when we get those items, they don't end up being an even bigger problem? And the story I wrote was about e-waste, and the NGOs highlighted simple stuff like mobile phones that we use, laptops that we use, and small gadgets that are supposed to bring efficiency, make life easier, if we don't discard of them properly, they will become a problem for the environment. And when you focus on telling the stories from the people's perspective, it makes them a little more involved, because that's what I got. People started talking about it, and I started getting inspired again to do environmentalist stuff and to talk about climate change, because they were telling stories that made sense to me. They were giving examples that I could recognize. So making sure that you have citizens empowered and talking about stuff that's close to home will give you an advantage in getting them on board when you talk about climate change. It will give you an advantage in getting them involved when you talk about climate change, because climate change is big. And when we talk about climate change, we immediately think about something that's huge. And it is an important thing. It is something that we need to work on. All of us need to work on. But all of us don't need to do big things for us to make a change. There's small steps that we can take and small things that we can do in order to go towards a better way of behaving for our climate, in order for us to make better decisions when it comes to our own climate. So that was I think the most inspiring thing for me about the program, that it got me thinking about um, climate, about something I love. It gave me new perspectives, because when I participated in the program, I also talked with a lot of fellows. I talked with a lot of people that had the sessions, and they gave different insights to the same stories. When we talk about climate change, we often forget that it's something that's happening in everyday life. And discussing that topic with people helps them recognize it is something that happens in everyday life. There are topics regarding climate change that we use every day. I mean, stories about e-waste. If I'm not thinking about the effect that my phone will have if I just discard it with a household garbage, it's gonna have an effect on the environment in the long run. If I dispose of it correctly and it's recycled, it's a small step that is taken towards preventing even worse. So that was about my participation in the whole thing. The NGOs and the people that I interviewed, they were also happy to have somebody listen to me. Locally, when our newspapers report a story, they usually report about the event, the activity that happened. And there's not a lot of storytelling into the reason behind or the after effects of the event. With citizens journalism, I experienced that I got a chance to talk to the people and get the feeling and the emotion behind what they are doing and what's happening. And I think that including the feeling and that emotion in our stories, in our storytelling, might benefit us all and really will help get people involved. That's it.
Thank you, Rubia. And I love that you mentioned that, a lot of the stories that environmental stories that are put out for the Caribbean tend to be very surface level, right? Or it's a story that you read a story after a big flood happens, or you read a story after there's a hurricane that passes and wipes out, an entire island, right? And that's how the storytelling tends to go. So I'm really interested in that opinion that you have, because it's true. And it's something that we need to step over that. We need to look more into research. We need to understand how these big impacts are affecting people on the ground. And that's where citizen journalism really comes in, So thank you so much for sharing that sort of point, And that leads me to Lorenzo. Lorenzo is from Suriname, and Lorenzo is one of our fellows who wrote a story that was very, key because it focused on the indigenous group. and indigenous groups. So Lorenzo is an operational weather forecaster at the Meteorological Services of Suriname with almost 10 years of working experience. He is in his final year at the Polytechnic College majoring in meteorology, and as a weather enthusiast, he is passionate about the dynamics as well as composition of the atmosphere and the effect on weather and climate and the effect that it has on livelihoods. So Lorenzo, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your story, and what inspired your story, and maybe where you want to see it go from next from here.
Thank you, Dezen. Thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to present on the climate tracker. As Dezen said, my name is Lorenzo. I am a weather forecaster, almost 10 years now. The reason I actually participated in the fellowship was because we have to deal with the fast changing climate and having to work with the weather, we see a certain change in weather patterns in the climate. So it was an opportunity for me as well to present my my knowledge and skills with the climate tracker and to write my story based on the effect of climate change. Um, I am how do you say the reason for writing the story on the indigenous communities as well as the maroon communities is because they are far in the interior, the rural areas where from my perspective their stories aren't really heard. So with having to present and to write this story, I actually got the opportunity to share their daily habits onto paper and having to present it on a more international as well as a national platform. Um, I have noticed from the interviews, because I got to interview a lot of people, they shared their stories on how their daily habits have changed drastically in the last decades because certain areas have flooded or even how do you, the migration of certain animals have affected their communities and their lifestyle. So I wanted to put that onto paper, and with the how do you say the research on the daily weather as well as our climate, I found it very important to put that out or to talk about it, as well as the communication, because we all know that some of the communities in the interior aren't really available for how do you say to communicate with them. So I thought about it, and it was actually an inspiration to talk about those communities, and yeah, that's why I actually did it, and as well as the migration and the adaptation, because a lot of the indigenous people have to adapt and even have to mitigate to the new, as we say, the new normal now, right now. So that is yeah, that is my contribution to the climate tracker. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your story, Lorenzo. So before I go on to the next speaker, Lorenzo, can you tell us a little bit about what that experience was like, sort of speaking with the people on the ground? Did you feel as though, you were there and you had the chance to sort of give them more of a voice or to amplify their voice? What was that experience like for you?
The experience was a bit overwhelming because having to talk to the representatives of those communities, I got to know a lot better about how they communicate with the people from the capital, for example, because there are certain steps to their ways of communication. They send it out to their representative of the ministry. Afterwards, they talk to their minister, and afterwards they go to the government. So it's a very long way to get to their endpoint. And by the end of the day, when it does reach the government, their areas have already, for example, flooded, or their crops have already, how do you say, the calamities have already occurred. So it's a bit a long process to go from their start to their end product. So that is why with the climate tracker, it gave them also the opportunity to hear their side of their story. So climate tracker is it's not only to give how do you say, to update my skills, but also one platform to give the people a voice. So that is why I think it was a very good experience.
Thank you so much for your story, Lorenzo. And next we're heading back from Suriname. We're taking a trip over to Trinidad and Tobago. So we're gonna hear from Rayan. And Rayan Gilbert is one of our fellows who also previously participated in the energy transition training program. She is an aspiring environmental engineer with interest in environmental journalism, and that's one of the reasons that Rian was selected, because although she's not trained in journalism, this sort of program, it really gives citizens journalists the opportunity to learn, right, about what the key impacts, what the key techniques are for environmental climate journalism. So Rayan, I want to hear from you specifically as an having recently completed your undergraduate degree in environmental science and sustainable technology at UWI. Tell us what this fellowship meant for you, and why, is it something that you think we should even continue doing in the region, and why? Ah, okay. Yes, Rayan, let me give you, you should be able to do it now. There you go.
Okay, yes. Morning. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. All right. Dizan, can you repeat the last part for me?
Sure.
I was just
So
trying to
just
get this
tell us,
into work.
no problem. Technical difficulties happen all the time. So we just want to hear a little bit about your experience with the fellowship and why you think, if you think citizens climate journalism is important for the Caribbean, and then tell us a little bit about your story as well, because it's very interesting to look at the moves that Trinidad is making in terms of compressed natural gas. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. And thanks, Suzanne, for the introduction. But I just want to start by saying that I was happy to have the opportunity this morning to actually share my experience and speak on programs like this. The programs that Climate Tracker is currently creating to give people in the Caribbean, people like me on the floor, the opportunity to speak and share their climate stories and give us a voice. So I want to say it as well that the program turned out to be everything that I hoped it would be and thought it would be as well. And I wanted to learn a lot more about journalism and writing my own stories and using the information that I would have done in my undergraduate environmental degree, as Design mentioned, into making it into a story that people would understand, because I don't have any prior experience with this. Well, not to say prior experience, but as compared to a lot of other fellows that I have here, So in the past, I would have expressed a lot of interest in getting into climate reporting. So when I saw the opportunity, I knew that I had to apply, and I wasn't disappointed. So I think Climate Tracker should definitely keep with the programs, because I know a lot of my colleagues who were in my program as well in university, they also wanted to join, but they weren't aware that it had a program like this that existed. So when I told them about it, they were very happy and interested. So they are looking out for a design. So remember that, please. Also, I learned a lot while doing my climate story. And well, one of the things that I learned was that deadlines were a very real thing. Hippolyto, I'm not sure if he's here, but he would, let you all know about that, because I was wants to do a different story initially, but I had to change it because it was a bit too much to do in the time frame that I had to do it in. So, getting into my story, it was titled CNG, compressed natural gas, easing the financial strain in Trinidad and Tobago. And in my story, it basically compared two types of people in Trinidad and Tobago: the people who use CNG, which was the minority of the population, and those that don't, which was the majority of the population, like me, right? And gas prices in Trinidad and Tobago rose twice last year. And that meant that people were spending more at the pumps, more money spent in fuel compared to whatever else they would have had to do. So that was creating a financial struggle. And the reality of it was that CNG remained at $1, one TT dollar, while super premium and diesel, they all increased over the past year alone, right? And for my story, I actually went on the floor. I went by the gas pumps at my local gas station, and I just spoke to those people who arrived at the CNG pump, and I spoke to someone that arrived at the normal pump. So I had an interview with Miss Williams, who received a free CNG kit back in 2020, and when the government had the CNG lottery going on, when anybody who applied, they had the chance to be selected and receive a free CNG conversion kit. On the other hand, I also spoke to Mr. Thomas, who was the other person to be compared in the interview, and he didn't have a CNG kit. He was like everybody else, he was just using normal gas. And in the end, in comparing all my statistics, I found that Miss Williams spent a lot less than Mr. Thomas, sorry. And yeah, she was simultaneously, reducing her carbon footprint by using this cleaner gas. So additionally, from this, I guess I was able to represent how much the majority of the population was struggling and how much of them actually are considering the CNG alternative, because who's to say that gas prices won't increase again this year, right? And for anybody, Desanya or Trini, right? So, a couple of days ago, our prime minister told us to prepare for difficult days ahead. And when we hear that, we immediately think, okay, gas is probably going to go up again. And we know once gas prices increase, everything else is going to increase as well. That's what we say, right? And the truth is, even if CNG increases to maybe $3, it's at $1 now. If it increases to $3 TT, it's still going to be less spent on regular fuel, and it is the cleaner alternative. And I believe that our government is trying to push for that. So I chose to tell the story because I myself, I'm like Mr. Thomas and the majority of the population. I don't have a CNG kit, but I do see those that do have a CNG kit, and I am considering in investing in the CNG alternative. And I also know people who also have the CNG kits, and they only had great things to say. But as somebody who is considering the switch, I wanted to get all the information, put everything on the line. I wanted to know if and how CNG, affected the performance of the vehicle. Because, if you speak to somebody, a non-CNG user, they would be like, okay, I'm not gonna put that in my car because you don't know what it's gonna do to the engine of the car. It might destroy the engine, and all these different things that people would come up with to not want to get CNG. So I initially thought like that as well, but in speaking with Miss Williams, I saw that she was maintaining her car, she was doing everything that they were saying that she had to do, and she was keeping up with these services, and everything was working fine for her. And in the end, I came to the conclusion that CNG is just a fuel. On my car, it runs on fuel. So yes, in the end, I was also able to tell my story with the help of my climate tracker mentor Hippolito. He was able to guide me through the entire process, getting my sources and doing the research. I never went on the floor before to speak to people, so that was a bit daunting initially, but it was very interesting as well. Yeah, he helped me edit and everything as well, and I felt like I was able to not only speak for myself, but also able to speak for Mr. Williams, or sorry, not Mr. Williams, Miss Williams and Mr. Thomas. So it was interesting to do that, and that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Rayan. And that's a very interesting perspective to look at, doing a comparison in that way. And I know that, publishing this story is something that would have been a big, a big step for you in terms of boosting your environmental journalism career and that direction that you wanna take. So thanks so much for joining us, Rayan. And I hope that you've enjoyed hearing from our fellows so far. We have 2 more fellows who want to share their experience and their story with you. So first we're heading from Trinidad. We're gonna jump across now back to Guyana. So we're hearing from Ronald Taylor, in Guyana. And to share a little bit about Ronald, he is a Guyanese-born news anchor, photographer, and editor. He started his career in communications mid-2016 as a junior reporter, and throughout the years, he has embodied every aspect of media offered. So, Ronald, tell us a little bit about your story. What inspired you to write this story, and what the experience writing this story was like for you?
All right, thanks, Liz, and good day, everyone. For me, my experience was quite thrilling. It's been about 6 years since I have done any writing and published any article. So for me, coming back and writing, it was quite an experience. I won't say it was a challenge because I was studying communication, but for me, coming back to joining Climate Tracker, I saw the the what should I say? The experience and the exposure from a few colleagues. They told me, you know what, this is a great opportunity, and being in news, looking at international stories, and you get to see that the climate issues are very challenging around the world. And coming back to Guyana, most times all you would hear about is flooding. And I wanted to bring something different and highlight a few other issues other than flooding. And my focus, particularly for this article I did, was to speak with farmers on issues they're facing, and to highlight some of the challenges they had. For my article, I spoke with two farmers, Mr. Diosaran, and he is a pineapple farmer. I don't know if you guys would be able to see my screen. Are you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Yes. So in my article, the focus was about, some of the challenges the farmers are having is that, their crop types, they need more guidance because, you're focusing on a particular crop type, but, each different crop type, they need more, what you would say, guidance and more encouragement in the area of sustainability. And basically, the farmers were highlighting some of the challenges they've had throughout the years. Both farmers, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Diosaran, they've been farming for a few years, but some of the practices were not that sustainable. And my article, we wanted to highlight some of these things. Coming out of the article, you get to understand that the farmers are trying. They want to do more to help with the climate, but they need the support from the relevant authorities. In this case, Mr. Diosaran, he is a pineapple farmer, and he spoke about the basically how he would dump his waste and what he would do in terms of how he would dispose of the waste. But speaking with him, he said that they would usually burn the waste, and that adds to pollution. And one of the challenges that you want to reduce is limiting that, the toxic or the pollutants going into the atmosphere. And we spoke about a few other ways and measures that he could use as an alternative rather than burning. You could just have a decomposition site, but it takes time. And guidance is needed in order for the farmers to get a better understanding and more manage their farms. But the thing is, when I spoke with the other farmer, which is Mr. Lewis, he said that through education, let's put it this way, and he said he used Google for reference. He said that his crop production is based on corn and you would call it the household foods. He has a bit of cabbage and so on. And he said that he used Google, and he discovered that instead of using the chemicals that you're accustomed to, that is sometimes it boosts the plants, but it damages the environment. He went for a more natural way, and he discovered the use of the hydrolyzers, which is like a fish version of the more chemicals that you would use, is more natural. And he, he shared with me, and, you could see it in my article when you go to Climate Tracker, that it's better to not damage the environment, because over time it would lessen the production space, but you get to use a better option that is more natural for the environment. And here you see he's given a demonstration of his fertilizer process. And for me, in my article, we wanted to touch on basically sustainable development, because obviously if you damage in the environment now, then what's there for the future? And this was basically my focus of my article. And now I'm part of the climate justice journalism fellowship with Climate Tracker. So I'll be focusing on more articles and issues around Guyana and what the people, how they feel. Like I did one with mangroves, and basically highlighting that there are other challenges that need to be remedied, and with help and support and with policies to ease some of these issues, we will get to help the climate in the long run and our environment and future generations. So basically that's what my article covered, and just hoping if you're listening that you want to be on board, because there will be more fellowships coming, I understand. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ronald, for this very interesting story as well, and looking at, the different approaches that these people are taking, but also on focusing on, the farmers, which is, I think, a really great angle that you took. So I'm looking forward to more of these stories that you'll publish through the Climate Justice Program, of course. So I'm going to move on next to our next fellow. So this will be our last presentation by Priscilla, who I believe Priscilla may not be with us right now.
I am here.
Okay, there you are. Hi, Priscilla. All right, so I wasn't seeing you for a second. So I'm gonna head over to Priscilla and a brief introduction to Priscilla. She is a communicator with great passion for writing. She has 5 years of experience looking at different areas in Suriname. She holds a bachelor's degree in history, and apart from writing articles, she loves writing reports and different activities and transcribing audio files as well. So Priscilla, tell us a little bit about your story and your inspiration, because your story was one of the most read of the 10. So tell us why you think fisheries is important for the Caribbean, first of all, and then what inspired you to write your story?
First of all, when I saw the fellowship, I didn't want to apply because I thought I didn't know much about climate change. So I thought to myself, there's nothing new to write other than about flooding or planting mangroves. So, but when Johannes saw it, he immediately WhatsApped me and told me to apply. And I told him the same thing, what I thought. And he said, no, there is much more to learn. So I took the chance. And indeed, I learned much more that climate change is it's more than flooding and planting mangroves. It directly affects the people. Um, so my story was inspired. I was thinking about what to write when I entered the fellowship. Then I remember the Minister of Fisheries saying a few months ago that due to climate change, there was a decrease in the seabed shrimp fishery. So I thought to elaborate more on that. So that's how I got the inspiration to write my story. I actually wanted to know, now that the government found out that climate change is affecting fisheries, which is so important for the government, I wanted to know what steps they were going to take. So I talked to the deputy director of fisheries. I also talked to a chairman of a fisheries organization, and a fisherman. So talking to the deputy director, he told me that there is no data actually. So what they are what they are saying about climate change affecting fisheries is just based on what they think, because every other impacts was taken out actually. Overfishing, illegality, they know that that was not a problem, so the only option was climate change. But without data, I can write a story. I have to base my story on proper data. So I went on to talk with the chairman and the fishermen. So they told me that um, actually climate change, working in the field for many years, they have seen what climate change can do, because the fish actually move out to other breeding grounds. So after some years, they themselves have to move. But the problem is they themselves have to move to um to be able to fish. So that's the problem they are facing. And the government is actually thinking about aquaculture, but the problem for the fishermen is that aquaculture is very expensive, and there is no way they can loan such great amounts of money within the banks of Suriname. So they are very concerned about their livelihood. So this climate journalism, citizen journalism, just helped me to tell the story of the fishermen and how they think about their future. I also saw that the chairman, um, they don't think about themselves, because most of the fishermen, they are not educated, but their boss, they are rich, but though they are rich and they have other means of livelihood, if climate change will cause them to stop fishing, they are also concerned about their workers. So they think about them, and they're asking the government to help them with aquaculture, seeing that it's so expensive. So it was citizen journalism helped me to tell the story from not only from the government, but also directly from the fishermen and the problems they face in the field, working in the fisheries sector. Um, and I also found out that climate change not only it affects different people in a different way. For some people, it affects their life. It is their livelihood that is on the line, and for some other people, it's where they stay, because they will have to move out to another place with all the flooding going on. So I think citizen journalism helped me to tell these stories from another angle, because earlier I will only just tell the story from the view of the government, and then I will be done. But this inspired me to go further, and also looked at solutions and how they are taking to go about it in the future, how to tackle climate change, because with illegality and overfishing, um, law enforcement and regulations can help there, but no one is talking about how to tackle um, climate change to get the fishers to hold on to their livelihood. So that was my story, and I'm looking forward to other fellowship so I can participate and write more stories.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, for sharing that with us and for tackling such a crucial issue that is important for, I would say, the entire, Caribbean region. And so now I'd like to open the floor to see if we have any questions that you maybe want to ask of myself, of Omar, Cropper Foundation, or of any of the fellows. So if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I just wanted to know from the fellows, since they wrote the article, what kind of responses did they get from their community or from the region? What was the impact they made?
Does anybody want to take that question? What sort of feedback did you, right, Lorenzo? Yeah, you can take that question.
Thank you, Johannes. So from my story, I both received feedback from the indigenous communities as well as some of the readers of the article. From the indigenous communities, they did say that it's not it's not every day that someone interviews them um, to hear their part of the story or to hear their part of their daily habits because of the how do you say, the long distance from the capital to reach their communities is very far. So having to have someone to write their part of their story is different. But from the on the other hand, from the readers, the other readers, I did have some people tell me that they did not know about how the effect of climate change changed their lives drastically. So it did make a difference for both of the parties to say. So I think it's very important that they have a platform, that we have a platform to write our stories, because climate change doesn't only affect the weather um, in general, but it does also affect communities. It affects the livelihoods. It affects our daily habits. So I think it's important to have that summed up, and that we have somewhere to go and to post it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Lorenzo. Ronald, do you want to maybe answer that question as well? What impact do you see your story having on the lives of farmers in Guyana?
Yeah, for me, I think it's going to be a great one because obviously support is needed. And, like I said, each crop type, they need special attention. And, you just can't focus on one particular type and leave the other because all are needed. And for me, in terms of the farm, they're saying that they need that support. So if they get better support, then it's in the long run, it will be more sustainable development. For me, it wasn't in my community because I'm from Georgetown. It was in, you would call it the West Bank, West Coast. That area, the farming is more higher than in Georgetown because of the land and everything. So I chose to highlight that area because you know we pay attention to different areas and the focus there. So for me, in that area, we wanted to highlight some of the challenges they were having because they had the pineapple farming, etc., going on in there, and the crop production over on the other side for the small crops. So for me, I see, once it get the relevant attention and the authority sees it, once they put in more effort to help the farmers, we see more development and sustainability in the long run.
Yeah, it's really about getting into the communities and helping to build the capacity of the people on the ground to deal with the issues as well. So thank you so much, Ronald and Lorenzo. I'm actually going to head back to Trinidad now, and I realized that the two Trinidadians that we have here wrote stories that were focused on the energy sector, which is, critical for Trinidad and Tobago. So, Rayan, I'm gonna sort of pass the baton to you in terms of your story. Do you think that your story could have any impact on people's decisions, or do you hope that it could have an impact on people's decisions and the type of gas that they're able to use?
Okay, yes, I would say so because I mean, I know my mother's friend, she read the story and she was very much inspired by it, seeing how much she spent on gas in maybe like a couple of weeks compared to how much she would spend. So it was a nice comparison to see, and it was inspiring for other people like me or Mr. Thomas who didn't have the CNG kits installed, and it was making them think, okay, well, maybe if I invest, it's about $15,000 TT for the 15,000 TT for the CNG kit to be installed in the car, depending on the size of the car, whether it's an SUV or whether it's like a normal car. So it's something to consider, yes, but in the long run, I think they would decide for themselves if it is worth the investment or not. So I think it would be inspiring for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And Christiane, in terms of the story that you wrote and looking at Trinidad and Tobago's attempts towards towards getting, moving out of the oil and out of the strangle of the oil and gas industry, tell me a little bit about what you hope that this story would could do for people on the ground, but also in terms of policy and decision making, and what sort of impact you hope that angle of your story can make.
I think what I wrote about can only do so much because 1,000 words is really not that much. Um, I think it needs to be paired with, so I want to move away from this a bit and say that people should learn about history so that they can recognize mistakes from the past, so that they can recognize it in the future. And I think that is what I want people to take away from it, to see that oil and gas has defined Trinidad, and it's going to define the future as well if we let it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Christiane. So one more round of questions that can probably come from those who have joined us. And I want to say thank you to everyone who made the time to join us this morning. Do we have any questions on the floor for any of our fellows? Any tough questions?
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
This is Wendy Hussein.
Hi, thank you for joining us,
Hi.
Wendy.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a general comment that this is a fantastic program, and I think there's a connection between the policy level and reaching the information, moving from the policy level down to, not down, but moving to the general public, because I think that that's where there seems to be a disconnect, and I feel things can maybe move forward a lot faster if the general public understood a lot of the policies and how it impacts their lives. So, I mean, I think this is a great initiative to move in that direction. And I was just thinking that, is it part of the fellowship that, especially, I'm just talking from my perspective in Trinidad and Tobago, that some of the policies that have been reviewed or have come out, like around like the climate change policy, just transition policy, those sorts of things. So is it that the fellows from Trinidad and Tobago are going to like dissect those policies and write articles about them, and so that the general public can understand how those policies are going to filter into their space and how it affects their lives? I'm just wondering about that.
Yes, so the fellowship has come to an end, but we are hoping to have it renewed and have another cycle this year. And then also this year, we are planning to have another cycle of the Energy Transition Fellowship, which we ran last year. So under that sort of fellowship experience, yes, we'll be diving a lot into the just transition policies across the region, and the energy transition policies that are being implemented and tried out in Trinidad and across different Caribbean countries. And that is the hope, that's why we do these fellowships at Climate Trackers, to really help journalists understand the technicalities of it all, and to find interesting story angles to help people understand what is happening, not just with regards to the climate crisis and different impacts, but also the solutions, what different governments are trying, and really getting that news out there locally, but also internationally. Because the fact is that, and this is something that I would have mentioned a lot in the Climate Justice Fellowship and to those fellows, is that the stories that our fellows are writing from the Caribbean are very local. They're very, very nationally based, and these are stories that are not, a lot of people out there don't know about. So that's why we are really happy to give these stories sort of an international audience, that people could understand what is happening in the Caribbean. And yes, Wendy, as you said, that is the objective, is to get our fellows to really understand at a very, very technical level, what is happening with regards to the energy transition, with regards to climate crisis and different impacts that it's having on livelihoods in Trinidad and Tobago and across the region. So thanks a lot, Wendy, for joining us and for that question. And I see that we have a raised hand. I think it's Ryan. Ryan, please feel
Hi.
free to unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes, so I was also a part of this cohort with Climate Tracker. So I'm actually one of the journalists, and one of my goals was to find a way to communicate with the public some of the nuances of public policy, as well as what the globe wants to move to. So my article spoke about how environmental finance influences our transition in terms of energy, where energy being food and fuel, right? And the whole world is moving towards sustainability, and there's a cost attached to it with respect to those facets of life that make modern life possible. And things like the just transition will be critical to our future as we try to balance this oil and gas sector against our responsibilities as a small island developing state. So, those areas, that's the types of things that I am interested in writing about. So you could be guaranteed that, as time progresses, and I hope that Climate Tracker will be able to facilitate more of these types of fellowships, that we could continue raising awareness about these issues, because as Dizanne said, these things are very unique to us. And as Christiane said, it is about how history shaped our development. So all these things are actually very important. So that's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. And I do look forward to the fellowships that we will have this year for the Caribbean region. I think we started off on a good foot in 2022. So let's look forward to really good things this year. And I see that we have a question coming in for Priscilla. Priscilla, Johannes wants to know your opinion on the fisheries industry, which is something that is a hot topic for Suriname right now. And the government wants to give permission to Guyana to fish in Surinamese waters. What's your opinion on this? What are the impacts that you think this could have for Suriname?
Actually, Johannes wants to put me in a tight position. But my opinion about this is that it's actually a very hot topic regarding the illegality and overfishing issue. I think let me start like this. The problem right now is that who's a wet? Johannes, who's a wet?
The law policy or
Yes,
policy
the
law.
law says that only you can give out licenses to people with a different nationality. So that's the problem right now. But in case of the illegality and all new for fishing, the problems with the Guyanese, I think if it will help to monitor this, I don't see the problem giving out licenses to the Guyanese, except only if the deal is fair, because they're also Venezuelans fishing in Surinamese water, so there doesn't have to be a problem. The deal should be fair. The Suriname has to benefit from the deal, and also Guyana. So that is, I think it's okay with me.
All right,
But
but
yes,
thanks a lot,
it's a
Priscilla.
topic to discuss. And
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic and something maybe you can take a look at what has happened with Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, with the fisheries. You might want to look into that as well. It's really interesting. And I see that we
May I
have,
add to that one, Lizanne?
sorry?
May I add to the question you just asked, Priscilla?
Yes, yes, yes.
I think it's also important that with regard to climate change and the environment, that when you look into collaboration or changing of our legislation, that we also think about adding enough measurements or adding enough ways for us to keep control of the opportunities that we provide. For example, our fishing waters, we've had some laws stating that fishers have to use certain kind of nets to avoid getting the small turtles.
bycatch.
Yes, within their
Yes.
nets. But we don't really have a good grip on the control and on people meeting that legislation. So when we're talking about our fishing waters and sharing our fishing waters, because that's what it is, it's the water in front of our country and we share it with the rest of the world. In order to preserve them, we also need to think about making sure that our protection mechanisms and our control mechanisms are in place. And that goes for Suriname, that goes for Guyana, and all of the other Caribbean countries.
Yes, that's true because there is a vessel monitoring system, but yes, but I don't know law enforcement. I don't know how far they go to um how do you say that, to discipline those who um go against the regulations.
They're mostly understaffed and underfunded, so they lack personnel, they lack equipment, and it's not the willingness that's lacking, but it's the resources that's lacking to adequately keep in mind that people live up to the rules that we set. So small countries
Yes.
like Suriname, in the picture of climate change and taking care of the environment, can also benefit with support for those kind of topics that we're talking about sharing our waters, we're talking about sharing our forests, but we have to keep the control mechanisms in place and support for smaller countries like ours that we can actually keep the control mechanisms in place is welcome, because
Yes.
we have set those rules. We have all the things that you need to keep
Yes.
in mind before doing it, but it's just lacking on, we simply don't have the personnel. We can't pay them. We don't have the vessels to go into the sea to do regular checkups to make sure that when we put the rule, that you live by the rule.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, definitely a good discussion there. So you see, I think this group of fellows that we had for our citizens program, I would say, it's very engaging. So thanks a lot, guys, for your contributions. And I see that we have, before we wrap up, I see that we have another fellow with us, Monica Hugh from Guyana. And Monica, your story was actually one of the most read stories, top three most read stories. So I want to know from you, to wrap up, just what your inspiration was for this story and what your experience was like, with producing this story as well.
Good day, everybody. Thank you for having me here. So, the experience with the story was very interesting because this was my first published story with Climate Tracker or on a whole. And so, it was my first time really going out and investigating everything. So, first of all, what triggered me to actually take an interest in writing a story like this was when I went to the market every day. I kept seeing food prices going up, and it was very interesting because a lot of people were complaining, and we all say that it's because of oil and gas, which is true, and other factors. But then I sat down and thought about it, and I said, but people don't really contribute some of these changes to climate change, and I wanted to put something like that into perspective for a lot of people. How climate change affects farmers, affects even them, and yeah, that's where the inspiration came behind. came from, sorry, and I basically started doing some research, all the information from when we started the fellowship. I took that in and I did some online research and I found some people to contact. Um, I visited a few farmers. Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Mackenzie was one of them I mainly talked to. And I wanted to know exactly how climate change and the price of food, what was the connection between those two things? And I wanted to share that with everybody who I could share it with. So basically, I found out that climate change has so many direct contributions to the increase and the loss of funds for farmers and every other person in the agriculture sector. And I think I just went out of my way. I spoke to some representatives from NARI. I spoke to some representatives from the local schools, the agriculture school in Guyana, and even interview um, some people who have wide experience in agriculture and climate change. So yes, that is where um, the thought process came from.
Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you for really being dedicated to that story. I think we've come to the time when we can wrap things up. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. Before we go, though, as is customary with our Caribbean team, we like pictures. So if you can put on your video, if that's possible, I would really appreciate it so that we can get some really nice screenshots. We can get some more people engaging with the stories that we have going on and what the programs that we have coming up. So if you are looking presentable, please put on your video and we'll take a nice little screenshot. If you're not looking presentable, it's fine. You can still put it on. All right. So
Design, I think it's disabled. The video function is disabled.
okay, yes, now it should work. Yes, we're seeing faces. Nice. All right. Some faces coming on. I'm gonna just, all right. Brian, I think you have your video on, but
Can
maybe you
anyone
have
see
your
me?
privacy shutter on or something because we can't see your face.
Okay, I'm trying. How do I turn that off?
It might be, I don't know if sometimes some laptops have that shutter that you can close and put on. I'm not sure if that's what's up there, but we can see that your video is on, but we can't see you. All right. Not sure
Okay,
what
I'm not sure what's going on.
That's fine. That's fine. All right, so I'm gonna take a screenshot. Thank you, everyone, and I love seeing the faces. Wendy, Shamaria, Fatuma, thank you for joining us. And I'm going to take a screenshot now in 2 seconds. 1, 2. Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you again to Omar Mohammed and the Cropper Foundation for your support in this program. And it's been a really good, really nice experience working with the Crop Foundation. So guys, please head over to Caribou. That's their website where the stories are being published, and they have a whole bunch of other stories that are being published there as well. They recently sort of did a relaunch, and they have new programs coming on board. So yeah, Omar shared it in the chat. Please head over there and get in contact with Omar at the Crop Foundation as well. To see what's happening there. I know they have a couple of projects, exciting projects that they'll be launching this year. And for Climate Tracker, you head over to climatetracker.org. So thank you so much, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.